Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. It's just, I suppose, it's a random way to start it, but there is a tropical storm, Tropical Storm Faye, which is, coming to the East Coast today. And, that means a lot of rain is headed our way, which I'm excited about because we haven't had a lot of rain out, near Jersey. Been pretty dry recently and very hot and humid, so I'm all about the rain. But in thinking about the rain, and specifically when you have a tropical storm, it can be pretty intense. Makes you think about ghost movies. That one of my favorite types of movies, specifically in the horror genre. I'm a huge horror fan. People who watch this channel, you know how much the Seaman loves horror. Heck, American Horror Story is one of my favorite stretches of the entire year. I love when I can sit down and talk about horror movies. But one of my favorite types of horror movies is the small ghost movie because it's difficult to pull those off. The small ghost movie really kind of relies on the subtle scares, not the big crazy scares. Yes, you can have ghost stories that lead to those big crazy scares, something like, say, Sinister, or even The Exorcist. But those are kind of more in the demonic possession realm of ghost type things. I'm talking about those movies where it's like you're watching and all of a sudden something in the background just goes by and you're like, oh no, man. Those movies are really difficult to pull off because they are much subtler. You have to find ways to scare people that gets under their skin more than makes them jump completely out of their seats. And that's exactly the type of movie that I watched the other night and was excited to watch because it looked like it was going to be that kind of movie. Doesn't quite hit it out of the ballpark. It definitely hits some of those bumps that you can get in these types of smaller ghost stories. And specifically the third act, for me, it just kind of landed a little bit flat. It almost like the movie didn't quite know what it was building to. So when you get to that pivotal, peak of the build, didn't quite hit the way I wanted it to. But there are stretches, specifically through the first two acts of this movie, that are really, really good when you're talking about low-key, subtle ghost stories. What am I talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair, man, take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in spoiler-free into You Should Have Left, which is a movie that pairs Kevin Bacon, one of my all-time favorite actors, and I love when he dips into the darker, more horror area of films. He doesn't do a ton of them, but when he does, he can be so good. And it teams him up with director-writer David Cope, who actually did one of my favorite kind of scary movies that happens to feature Kevin Bacon in Stir of Echoes. Now, Cope has also done, from a writing side, Spider-Man, Jurassic Park. You could just list movie after movie after movie that Cope wrote. And then on the directing side, he's done things like Secret Window and, like I said, Stir of Echoes that I'm a big fan of. He's got some downsides like directing Mordecai or writing Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Sorry, I think that's the full name. It's a movie you try to forget about some days. Most days. I say this about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. There are stretches that are really good in that movie, but it's just too far out in sci-fi for an Indiana Jones movie. It just need to be I don't buy the end in Aliens. It's just too much. Anyway, when you have a creator who can hit, with stuff like, say, a Jurassic Park from a writing side or a directing side, something like Stir of Echoes or Secret Window, which, again, smaller, subtler movies, but as I add the misses that David Cope has, I'm not surprised that this movie doesn't quite knock it out of the ballpark. For one, like I said, I don't think Cope exactly knew where he wanted to go. The concept is interesting. It's cool. It's a good house haunting ghost movie and story. And the things that he wants to play with the house and the things that, like the ghostly things that happen in the house, play quite well, specifically in those first two acts. But it just feels like by the time you get to the end, it's like didn't quite know how to put the cherry on top of that sundae, and it falls a little flat. And that's probably my biggest gripe. But from a filmmaking standpoint, David Cope knocks it out of the park, man. This thing is shot so wonderfully. Like the just the flow and the look of the movie is tremendous. Now, the location helps. This movie is about a man named Theo, who's played by Kevin Bacon, who's married to a younger actress played by Amanda Seyfried named Susanna, and they have a daughter, Ella, who's played by Avery Essex. And you know, it's one of those things where there could be some maybe rocky things with the relationship. Kevin Bacon's character certainly thinks like it doesn't seem like he's full, like it seems like he's apprehensive, like maybe there's stuff that he doesn't quite trust about his much younger, more beautiful girlfriend. And so she has a movie that's getting ready to film in Europe. And he's like, we should just go on a trip. She's like, why don't we go out to Wales before you gotta go? Yeah, I think it's England is where she's shooting, maybe London. It's like, let's go stay for a couple weeks out before you start shooting your next movie or whatever. So they go to this house that's in Wales. And the cool thing is, outside of the second story that we see anytime we're on the exterior or in this picture, there's a picture of the house that we see a bunch of times in the movie. Outside of that second story, that house is real. And it was one of those things where I was watching the movie with my parents, and I went to my mom. I was like, this looks like they might have shot like on location at an actual house. And if they did, man, this house is a treasure trove for shooting a movie, man, because there's so many interesting nooks and crannies to the house, and it seems like it can go on forever inside the movie. And the hall, like a lot of brickwork and really long hallways. And turns out, after I watched the movie, sure enough, they were on location at this house. It's a real house. Now, granted, there are things in the movie, specifically like when they go downstairs, there's a darker area of the house that very clearly is all set made. But the main part of the house, when they're in the kitchen or in the bedrooms or in the living room or outside, real house outside of the second floor that doesn't exist. But like is a real place you can actually rent it. And after watching this movie, I was like, I kind of want to go to Wales and rent this house just because I want to see if it's creepy to be in a house after seeing a movie like that. Like, it's one of those, like, my mom was like, I wonder if the owners knew what kind of movie they were shooting at this house, because it could, but I would say it would impact their rentals probably in a good way. But because of this house being so amazing, it just creates so many rich environments for Cope to shoot in and work in. And there are just moments. There is now, granted, this isn't, I'm sure this isn't actually part of the house. It's probably one of the set pieces. But for the context of the movie, there is a staircase with like a very specific kind of light that's in the staircase. One or two times you end up in there. The way it is shot is just creepy. It looks really, really nice, and the composition, the way it's done, I'm like, it's the one spot that like constantly pops for me. Like when I think about how the movie looks, just like, oh, that was cool. But the other thing that I love from like the filming standpoint, besides just like the way Cope shoots the movie, the way he plays with shadows. Like I said, you're in a subtle horror ghost story, shadows and things moving in the background, and those little scares are all the things you want. And I think he plays specifically with shadows really, really well in the movie, to the point where it gets under your skin, and that's what you want out of one of these smaller, less jumpy, scary type ghost movies. And that stuff I think Cope nails. And he gets a lot of help because Kevin Bacon is tremendous in this movie, man. He is just so good. Like, everything he's doing, you're buying. Like, being the untrusting husband to a younger, beautiful wife. You get all of that. He has a dark past to a degree. Like, there's a cloud that's hanging over him, and that stuff plays well, feels real. And then when the scary stuff starts happening, where he thinks he might be losing his mind or he's having bad dreams, just works, man. Like, his facial expressions and his body movements, like, he just nails it. The whole, like, there is never a moment in this movie where Kevin Bacon is not crushing it. And that's one of the reasons I enjoyed it as much as I did, because he's just so good. Even when the movie doesn't quite know what to do with the end of itself and where to go and how to make it all make sense and work, he's still crushing it. So love Kevin Bacon. Always love Kevin Bacon. Amanda Seyfried is solid. Her character's a lot smaller and doesn't have as much to do as Bacon does, or even Avery Essex for that matter. She has a much smaller role than the other two, but she's good. Like, she brings what you need in that role. And I like the interaction. It's kind of one of those like initially like I don't know if I'm gonna be able to buy this relationship, and then you watch the movie and you're like, oh, I do buy this relationship and what this relationship is within the movie. And a lot of that has to do with the chemistry between Bacon and Seyfried, and Seyfried's performance, is good enough when she's on screen. But for me, the actor that steals this movie is little Avery Essex, who plays Ella. I adore this little girl. It was funny. I'm sitting there and I was watching it, and she kind of looks like a young Chloe Grace Moretz, where it was like, oh man, I wonder if she's related. And I was like, oh no, she's not. But kind of has one of those looks. And in a movie like this, she's got like bigger lips, and just like the way she furrows it, just like it works perfectly for what you ask her to do from the physicality standpoint. Like the facial expressions and the looks of fear or when she's scared work really, really well. But overall, her character, you just become attached to her and you start to feel for her because there are things going on and there are things that she understands but doesn't quite know about. So, like, she asks questions. There are moments in the movie where even mom was like, why would you tell the kid that? I'm like, well, because very clearly the kid is picking up on things. Like, she's a very smart kid. And, her role is kind of small at the beginning, but the main chunk of this movie is Bacon and Avery Essex. And she holds her own with one of the best in the biz really, really well, man. Like, she brings it as a little kid. And granted, you're not asking her to carry the movie, but I think she's a sneaky surprise in this, where, like, I got to the end, I was just like, man, I didn't love the movie because, like I said, I think the third act falls flat, but the performances are great, and she stands out. Like, there's this nice bright spot in this movie where it's like, all right, keep your eye on Avery Essex, like that name. See if it pops up anywhere as we go forward, because I really liked what she did as from a child acting perspective. And because she makes you buy into it, there's not a ton of character development in this movie, very minimal. And the other thing that's nice too is it's tight. It's 90 minutes in and out. Unlike Eurovision, which I just recently reviewed, you can see it right there. A little bit too long. This was perfect. Granted, you want a stronger ending, but you're not there for that long, so it softens that blow a little bit. And in a movie that's that tight, you don't necessarily have a ton of time for character development or storytelling. A lot of it has to just be, your connection to the characters just have to kind of be what they're doing on screen, and what you feel for or don't feel for with them. And that's the thing that all three actors do really, really well. And, I think there's enough. You probably could have used a little bit more development specifically for Susanna's character, and maybe a little bit more of Theo's background. But you can pretty much understand that, I think, pretty well by the time you get to the end of the movie. You get enough about Kevin Bacon's character where it's like, more context might help, but I understand enough of what's going on where you can sit back and enjoy, what's a quick, easy horror movie. And like I said, it's not the jumpy, scary movie, which it could have been. It's more that subtle, like when you're in your house alone after you watch a movie like this and you hear a creak, you're going to be like, uh-oh. Or you open a door and you're like, oh, please be where I want to go. It's one of those movies. And that stuff, I think, works well. I wish. It's one of those, like, you get disappointed because you wish you would have stuck the landing perfectly. And it falters a little bit because I don't quite think the movie knew where it wanted to go or how it wanted to end or how it wanted to explain or wrap up the ghost story. But for me, good enough, man. There's some really interesting elements we've seen in the trailer, like when he measures the house and starts kind of playing, like the way they play with the house in the movie, I thought worked really, really well for this type of scary movie. So not perfect, but you should have left. Was worth not leaving for, staying around to watch it. So there you go, man. Those are all the C-Man's thoughts on you should have left. Now I want to know what you're thinking. Did you think you should have left this movie? Did it not work for you? Did it work for you? What were you liking or disliking about it? If you saw it, if you didn't see it, if we enticed you to want to check it out, let me know. Anything you're thinking down below in the comments section. I'll talk to you guys down there. Always look forward to that. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out, show a little love for the old C-Man because you like what we're doing over here at the Cinema Sit-Down, maybe want to join the Cinema Sit-Down squad, jump over there, man. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the little bell that follows so you can get alerts for any videos that we drop here at the C-Man Cinema Sit-Down. Until next time, for the C-Man Cinema Sit-Down, I'm the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace. Well, you guys are still here. You must be looking for some more content. Well, don't worry. C-Man's got you covered, man. You got videos like this guy and this guy. And if you haven't yet, and you want to come check out all the C-Man goodies, join the Cinema Sit Down squad, man. Hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the little bell down below that, too, so you can get alerts every time I make new videos.